Hiya, I'm going to be trying to stream an analysis of my game in the 4NCL online to see if it's at all popular and if anyone actually wants to see a stream of game analysis. But I'll start as I mean to go on, try and only be 20 minutes at most. This will also be uploaded to my YouTube channel, so if you wish to re-watch it for whatever reason, you can. So I was playing in the 4NCL Division 1, and as I am top board for my side, Lord help them, I had to play against an international master, James Adair, who is well over 2400, very, very strong IM, and I've played him once before, about a year and a half ago, I think, in Newcastle, Northumbria or something, in northern England. And I was worse most of the game, but was able to get a draw right at the end. Because my FIDE is actually 2160, but that's partly because a few months before lockdowns and stuff, I had food poisoning and I still played in the tournament, so I dropped about 60 FIDE points. So I think I was about 2215 or something before that, and I think I was going up as well. I want to say that I was performing around 2300 in most tournaments, but that's how things are. So I thought I had a chance, but I didn't think it was a good chance, and our team was vastly outgraded. The team which we were facing were all about 2400 or thereabouts, and our side had me, which has an online rating of like 2300. Then our board 2 is an improving player who probably is quite similar, maybe like 2200, 2300. But then our bottom two boards are about 2100 maybe. So we still have chances, but the statistics are weighing against us. I was white. I started off with move e4, and James Adair decided to play a Sicilian, knight f3, and d6. So I can play d4 main line, which is very, very popular. I could play bishop b5 check if I want to experiment a little bit. Knight c3 goes into a kind of closed Sicilian, or I could play a sort of King's Indian attack with pawn d3. But I elected to choose a different move, pawn c3, the Alpin Sicilian, c3 Sicilian, knight f6, and you can go for traps with moves like h3 and bishop e2, and the trick is that if black chooses to capture, then queen a4 will check the king and fork the knight, winning the game, or winning material which will lead to you winning the game. But as I'm facing an IM, I'm not really expecting him to fall for that. And the line I chose was bishop d3, a slightly unusual move, but there is a plan behind this, which is not to play d4 straight away, tuck my bishop away on c2, where it's guarding my pawn, and then I play d4. But he pinned me, bishop g4, and I chose h3, putting the question to the bishop. Does he want to take my knight? Does he want to retreat back to maybe d7? Or does he want to play what he did, bishop h5? And his bishop is now a bit less active and has fewer places to go. So I've managed to make his bishop just a little bit worse. And even though h3 is a slightly weakening move, if I castle, I think I can get away with one pawn move on that side, because it might give heir to my king if I ever get back rank checkmated. So bishop c2, continuing my plan. I want to play d4 at some point, or d3, depending on how he responds to my moves. Knight c6, very sensible. And I did choose d3 here, because I've seen this kind of position where you often bring a knight all the way around to that sort of g3, and it's a somewhat closed centre with d3, so if white can get the attack on the king's side, then they're usually doing fairly well. e6, this is all theory of some kind, although I don't know the line that well. Knight d2, d5, so black slowly encroaching into white's half of the board, sort of trying to control all the squares in the centre of the board, and I could try a sort of French defence idea with e5, but it doesn't work here because instead of moving his knight back, which is normally almost forced in the French, I think he can play knight takes e5, And the problem I have is that if I do a check or something clever, he can easily put the knight back and just block the check. If I take the knight, I drop the queen. So that's not really my favourite move there. And if I try g4, hoping that the bishop will have to move, then I grab the knight. The Zwischenzug, intermezzo, knight takes check. I take with the knight or the queen, then he can drop back, winning a pawn. So I don't want this line with black guessing one of my central pawns for essentially nothing. So queen e2 to me felt like the best move, improving the queen a little bit, guarding e4 and d3, and also waiting to see how black will approach this. And I think queen c7 is a very, very good move. It gives black the option of castling on the queen side, so that means I may not want to commit everything to the king side, because there wouldn't really be much to aim at on the other side of the board. But black still has the option of castling kingside after moving their bishop as well. And it's an extra guard against me playing e5 anytime soon, because the queen and knight are on it, and the bishop can always sort of take my knight in some cases. And even if I can play e5, the knight drops back and attacks the pawn yet again. And I'd be guessing, I think, a fairly bad version of the French. So I castle, although knight f1 was an interesting move, trying to put my knight on g3 straight away. But I didn't like this as, again, if he castles queenside, perhaps the knight maneuver is not correct. So bishop e7, improving the bishop, and I again wait with rook e1, seeing where the black king is heading to. And after castling, which apparently this is still, I think, got one game. Oh no, a few more. It's got about 10 or 11 games. And a few matches between 25, 2600s. So we're still somewhat in theory, although now I'm totally out of book. But I know the idea, which is to play knight f1 to g3. Then a very clever move, h6. It prevents my bishop moving in the same way as my h3 did earlier. I can't have the bishop going to the g file, but also the knight can't, and the bishop will not be taken by one of my knights. It can slink back to h7. And I did think about knight g3, which is apparently the best move, or the most popular move at least. But I thought that if I'm going to attack the king side, I might want to combine the idea of improving my pieces with a pawn storm, chucking the pawns up, hoping to induce weaknesses. Bishop drops back, knight g3, perhaps I can use f5 and h5 for my knights, causing problems, and rook fd8, so black is continuing their plan to attack in the centre and the queen side, because they can easily shove their own pawns up with b5, gaining more space. And then maybe c4 or d4 could be played by black, or b4. And here I'm not entirely convinced I did the right plan, because I wanted to play moves like f4, or maybe bishop f4. But if I do that, then, well, f4 is illegal, and bishop f4 I lose the bishop. So what I ended up doing was moving the knight on f3 to attack their bishop, gaining time, and then because of various tactics like knight takes pawn and then the bishop is lined up with my knight, I dropped it back to fianchetto my knight, which would allow bishop f4 and pawn f4 to be played with support. Then c4 was played. Black gets in there, breaks. They are gaining lots of space, challenging my pawns in the centre and opening up the position. With my knights and bishops not exactly ideally positioned, this could be very, very good for black. And I did look at pawn takes pawn, but I was worried about d4, strangely enough. The whole thing just looks really uncomfortable for me to play. I can't really improve my pieces very well. Bishop and knight to e3 are unavailable. The moment I put something on f4, there's e5, gaining more time. And, you know, if black can, they might even take me doubling up and isolating my pawns. And, you know, they could always play knight e5 and take my pawn on c4 if they need to win the pawn back. So even though it's a pawn sack, it looks very, very good for black. And there's also other moves like bishop c5 or rook ac8 as well that I haven't even mentioned yet. So perhaps this was the best way to play, but I was chickening out, and I played d4, thinking that black had to take me, otherwise I'd play e5. And I thought that perhaps, if everything came off and we trade loads of pieces, perhaps I might even be a tiny bit better in these positions, because I've got this good central pawn which is protected. I can quickly get out the bishop to f4. My knight has all sorts of places it can go. e3, it could go to f4 itself and then h5 maybe for the knight, or it could maybe go to h4 and then come back round to f3 again, then go to e5. So my knight can be very flexible, going all over the board on the king side. But in the game, James Adair found a move I hadn't really analysed for very long, which was e5. I'm not even sure I considered this at the time. If I did, it was only for a brief moment. And it's a very nice move because it forces the trades of pawns in the centre of the board, and I think he has more central control right now. So my options are essentially taking one of the two pawns or playing some harebrained scheme trying to attack the king side. So naturally, I didn't choose either of the best two moves, and I chose to attack the king side with g5. What I was scared of was that if I took with the pawn here on d5, the knight would take back, then there's stuff like knight f4 in my future, there's pawn takes, this rook could actually slide to e8 sometimes, lining up with my queen. Black may also wish first to trade off bishops before doing this stuff with knight takes d5, but either way, black's gained more space, their knight is improved, and I don't really see how my kingside attack goes anywhere. And I've weakened my own king by pushing the g-pawn. That's why my g-pawn push may not have been ideal. And if I take on e5, again, I think he can take with the knight, but there might be something better, but this looked also very, very good. The knight might be able to jump into d3, and even though it could sack a pawn, I might be in very deep trouble. So, for example, if f4, knight d3, and I capture the knight and captures, at minimum, black has pawn takes pawn, winning back the material because their rook is lined up with my queen. Black has a passed pawn, more space, bishop c5 could be coming in as well. And again, I just really don't like this at all for white. So my move of g5 was not correct. I was hoping that after h takes g5, which was played in the game, and then takes, then there would be knight takes d5, bishop takes h7, king takes, and I thought maybe I had chances with queen h5. King moves back, and I mean at the very least I can win back the pawn like this, and I've got something. But maybe taking on e5 is better first, actually, now I think about it. Maybe taking here is better. Then knight takes. But again, I'm letting his knight become stronger on e5, so I wasn't over the moon with this idea. And there's also knight f5 in some cases that might be very strong. But even if my attack doesn't work on a computer, at least it's interesting, and I can claim that I have some compensation. However, what happened in the game was that he found this excellent move, bishop d3, which I totally missed. What this does is it essentially forces me to capture on d3. I can't really improve my queen anywhere, and he could always take the bishop next turn when I might have an inferior position to when I capture it here. Or we could just simply wait with the bishop and capture on d5, and I can't take on h7 because this bishop isn't there anymore. So I did trade, and then he took. So he's given up his c-pawn in order to avoid any of my kingside initiative. It's a very, very good plan. Again, I don't really see how else I can claim even equality unless I charge at the king. Knight f5. Then bishop f6 was an excellent move. improving his bishop and certainly holding the position. I took, thinking that if I didn't take, I may lose a pawn at some stage if he keeps taking on d4, and his rook is still lined up with my queen. And I was nervous of knight to f4, attacking my queen twice with the rook and knight. But I did think maybe after queen g3 I was just about okay here. If knight takes, I might be able to take that knight a couple of times, and if bishop takes, I can't take on g5. That would be a huge blunder because of knight to h3, winning the queen. But again, maybe I can trade everything essentially with bishop or pawn takes. I'm not sure which one. Maybe knight takes is better. And then if bishop takes, that's okay. If pawn takes, that might be okay. But I think bishop takes is better. And I can take with the bishop. If pawn takes, they lose instantly to getting mated. So queen takes f4. And then I have to decide whether or not I wish to trade queens. My instinct is, actually, after trading queens, again, I can claim some compensation. It might not be quite enough for equality. But black could just have a few issues in this line, because they've got doubled pawns and two isolated pawns on the C file and the A file. So despite my being a pawn down, my pawn structure is maybe perhaps a little bit better on the queen side. I've got a majority and all my pawns are together, and my king is perfectly able to save the f and h pawns by staying on, say, g2. And maybe if I play something like rook e4 or rook ad1 or rook e2, I might have a draw in an ending, but I would need to play it accurately. So in the game, knight takes e5 was the move. I played queen g3 to attack the g5 pawn with the bishop, line up with his knight as well, and also the king. So I thought the queen was being its most sort of annoyance to black. And I think here is where he made the mistake. Possibly his only mistake in the game. He'd played extremely well up until here. Because possibly he has moves like knight g6 is what I was thinking at the time, actually, trying to trade the queens. And while that's a rather boring approach to having a better position, it would remove a lot of my counterplay. Trading queens makes it very unlikely that I will achieve a checkmate anytime soon. So this was the thing I was sort of thinking about, and possibly I was going to play queen g4, trying to still retain an initiative somehow. But I think it's better than what he played, which is rook e8, and then I spent quite a while on this, maybe 10 minutes or so, because from a strategic point of view, I need to improve these pieces, as they haven't moved all game, and I need to connect the rooks to reach a middle game finally. So the move that looks obvious at first is bishop takes g5, and that's the move which my instinct said was correct. The only problem with that is I lose the queen. If I take here, and he takes back, and then I play queen takes g5, then black has knight f3, family fork on the queen, rook, and king. So I'll lose the queen for essentially nothing. But again, it felt like the right move, bishop takes g5, so finally I played it because I found this nice resource. Black has to take. If there's no bishop takes g5 for black, then I think I may even have the advantage. And here I found knight takes g7, which is very, very difficult for black to respond to. If they move something other than their rook, I can grab it, which will also attack their queen. Definitely not what black will like. If there's some other move like rook e7, I think then I can either take the bishop later, not now, but I'm planning to take it, or I can maybe even take the knight later. So there's the move like f4 could be played, but I would have played knight f5 because I'm attacking this rook, I'm attacking the bishop, which is for free, and there's also pressure on black's knight. So again, very comfortable looking position for white. It's possible that f6 might be the best move. If black's having to play f6, dropping the exchange, And then after that, there's even moves like f4 coming up. Again, black is in real trouble. So what James Adair did is he played the correct move, and the game sort of petered out to a draw. Queen takes g5, and the rest of the moves are simply us going back and forth with checks. The problem is that if black tries to get out of the checks and goes king e7, I was going to play f4 potentially, or maybe rook a d1. Both moves look very good for white, but there's actually an even stronger move, which I may have found if posed this problem in the actual game. To me, f4 looked easy, but there's actually rook takes e5, check, queen takes, and then rook to e1, which will pin the queen to the king. So black's best option, I think, is to give up the queen desperado style, and then hope that the two rooks are a good enough match for the queen. But I have doubts. I think the queen should overpower the rooks because the king is very, very weak. But it's possible I've not evaluated it correctly. I was also looking at the fact that I have two extra pawns. I'm not sure how much they mean in these positions against two rooks, with both kings being somewhat exposed. But it's a nice feature to have on the board. I'd much prefer this than black having the two extra pawns. So f4 probably would have been my move, but rook e1 was also very, very good as well, and rook a d1. So he correctly took the draw by perpetual check. And so I drew with the IM. I was very happy to draw this. Unfortunately, my team were not as fortunate. We did end up losing on all the other boards, but our board 2 was able to keep the game going a very long time, and looked like they might have drawn it at a few stages. But eventually, the 2400 player finally sort of got through at about 70 or 80 moves in to the game, maybe even longer than that. So hope you've enjoyed this video. Again, I'm going to upload it to YouTube probably tonight or tomorrow. So if you missed it, or if you for some reason want to watch it again, you can do. See you around.